A to Z Mysteries, Book Number 22, The Vampire's Vacation, by Ron Roy. Chapter 3. The kids thanked Mr. Paskey and left his shop. "I wonder who left that $20 bill on Mr. Paskey's counter," Ruth Rose said. "I bet it was that guy. I know he went in there," Josh griped. "People don't just vanish." "But maybe vampires vanish," Ruth Rose said, grinning at Josh. Dink laughed. He pretended to read a newspaper headline. "Vacationing vampire vanishes." "Laugh, you guys," Josh said. "But I think that guy is definitely weird. And did you notice how Mr. Paskey didn't even think it was strange that some guy disappeared inside his shop?" Dink thought for a minute. "Mr. Paskey's not the only one who's not acting like himself. When we saw that guy through the window in Ellie's diner, Ellie looked afraid of something," he said. "She was probably afraid Josh would choke because he was gobbling his ice cream so fast," Ruth Rose said. "Now can we go home? We have lunch at my house." A few minutes later, they reached Ruth Rose's house. They walked the backyard with the wagon. Ruth Rose's brother, Nate, was sitting at the picnic table. In front of him were a box of plastic action figures, some crayons, and drawing paper. "Hey, Nate, what are you doing?" Dink asked. "Drawing my guys," Nate said, holding up a picture. It showed Spider-Man and Superman fighting a purple monster. "Where's Mommy?" Ruth Rose asked her brother. "Here I am," her mother said, popping up from the open cellar hatchway. "Thanks for taking those newspapers away," she said. "There are plenty more down here when you feel like working. I left sandwiches and lemonade in the fridge for you." "Thanks, Mom," Ruth Rose said. "We'll take more papers later." The kids brought their lunch to the picnic table, and Ruth Rose cleared a space. As they ate, they watched Nate trying to write words on his picture. "Can I help?" Ruth Rose asked her brother. "Write, 'I give up,'" said the monster, Nate told Ruth Rose. He handed her a purple crayon. "That's a neat color," Dink said. "It's party purple," Nate told him. "And guess what? It smells like jelly beans." Ruth Rose printed the words, then pointed to each one in turn as she read them aloud for her brother. "Thanks, Ruth Rose," said Nate. He grabbed the picture and ran to show his mother. "I wonder if that guy we saw sleeps hanging upside down," Josh said. "I hate to spoil your fun," Dink said. "Bats sleep that way, not people." "And vampires aren't real," Ruth Rose said. "Dracula was a real person," Josh said. "I read about him." "But Dracula wasn't really a vampire," said Ruth Rose. "And he died a long time ago." Josh wiggled his eyebrows. "How do we know he's really dead?" Ruth Rose laughed. She reached into Nate's box and pulled out a miniature plastic Count Dracula. "Here he is," she said. "See?" Josh said. "He looks just like our guy, all dressed in black." "Except this one has long fangs," Ruth Rose said, standing the vampire on his plastic feet. Painted on, blood dripped from the fangs. "The guy we're following might have fangs," Josh said. "We didn't see his teeth." Suddenly, Dink remembered something. "Guys, did you notice that Mr. Paskey was wearing a band-aid on his neck?" he asked. "I did," Ruth Rose said. "A little round one, right here." She put a finger on the side of her own neck. "Well, Ellie had one just like it on her neck," Dink went on. Josh stopped chewing, and his eyes widened. "Swallow, Josh," Ruth Rose said. Josh gulped, then took a swig of lemonade. "Don't you guys get it?" he asked. "Vampires bite people on their necks to get blood. I'm not kidding around anymore. I think that guy really is a vampire." "The only vampires are on TV, Joshua," Ruth Rose said. "Who says?" Josh argued. There are a lot of things that people don't think are real, then they turn out to be. Dink was staring at Josh. Like what? He said. Josh stared back. Like giant squids, he said. But giant squids are real, Ruth Rose said. Scientists have found their bodies washed up on the shore. No one's found any vampire bodies that I know of. That doesn't mean there aren't any, Josh said. There could be a lot of vampires that people don't know about. And you think that guy in black is one of them, right? Dink said. Josh nodded. I'm starting to. Well, whoever he is, I still think I've seen him somewhere, Ruth Rose said. I say we try to find him again, Josh said. Why? Asked Dink. For one thing, I want to know how he keeps disappearing, Josh said. He grinned at Dink. And I know you're curious about those band-aids on Ellie and Mr. Paskey. Okay, I admit it, Dink said. So, where do we look? Ruth Rose collected the paper plates and cups. I can't believe I'm going vampire hunting, she said. If he stays in town, Josh said, standing up, the first place to check is the Shangri-La Hotel. A few minutes later, the kids were on their way to the hotel. They kept their eyes open, but the man in black was nowhere to be seen. When they walked into the hotel's cool lobby, Mr. Linkletter was talking on the phone. He looked up and nodded as the kids approached the counter. Soon, Mr. Linkletter hung up the phone. Hello there, he said. What brings you to the Shangri-La? We saw a stranger in town and wondered if he's staying here. Josh plunged in. Mr. Linkletter raised one eyebrow. And why are you so curious about this stranger? He asked. Ruth Rose came to Josh's rescue. Because he looks familiar, she said. I'm trying to figure out where I've seen him before. Mr. Linkletter squinted his eyes and pursed his lips. He tapped a long finger against the countertop. Describe this person, please. He's dressed in black, Dink said. Black hair all slicked back, Josh added, and his skin is real pale. Ah, said Mr. Linkletter. That would be Dr. Cula. He looked at his register. A. Cula, a doctor from New York City. Is he in his room right now? Ruth Rose asked. Mr. Linkletter looked down at Ruth Rose. His mustache twitched, as if he might smile. You know I can't tell you that, he said. Shangri-La guests pay for privacy, and I make sure they get it. Mr. Linkletter shut the register with a soft thud. Was there anything else? No thanks, Dink said, looking up at Mr. Linkletter. Then his mouth fell open. 3 inches to the right of Mr. Linkletter's Adam's apple was a small, round band-aid. Chapter 4. Thanks a lot, Mr. Linkletter, Dink stammered. He hurried Josh and Ruth Rose out of the hotel. Did you see Mr. Linkletter's neck? He whispered when they were on the sidewalk. He had on a band-aid just like Ellie's and Mr. Paskey's. Are you sure? Ruth Rose asked. Dink put a finger on his own neck. It was right here, he said. Now, do you guys believe something weird is going on? Josh croaked. A vampire is stalking Green Lawn. He's drinking everyone's blood. We gotta call 911. Josh, calm down, Ruth Rose said. There could be a lot of reasons for those 3 band-aids. Name one, Josh said. Mr. Linkletter could have cut himself shaving, Ruth Rose suggested. Okay, but Ellie didn't cut herself shaving, did she? Josh retorted. It's strange that all 3 of them needed band-aids on the same day, Dink put in. Yeah, and the people wearing them are acting strange, Josh said. Mr. Linkletter never gives out the names of his guests, but he did today. Josh squinted his eyes. I'll bet if we looked under those band-aids, we'd see fang marks. Ruth Rose grinned. Are you going to go back inside and ask Mr. Linkletter to take off his Band-Aid? No, but we have to find this guy, Josh said. He's already turned Elliot and Mr. Paskey and Mr. Linkletter into vampires. We have to save Green Lawn. Josh, calm down, Dink said. I agree that something weird is going on around here, but I don't think that guy is a vampire. And even if he is, what could we do about it? Run him out of town, Josh said. Ruth Rose shook her head. Run him out of town? How? Just then a shadow fell over the kids. A voice asked, What are you kids whispering about? The kids jumped and Josh let out a moan. But it was only their friend Livy Nugent. She worked as a maid in the Shangri-La. Hi, Livy, Ruth Rose said. How are Nicole and Ned? Growing like weeds and eating like lion cubs, Livy said. So, what's up? Do you know Dr. Cula? Dink asked. He's staying in the hotel. Livy nodded. He checked in last night from New York. Wears all black, right? She said. That's him, Josh said. Have you been inside his room? Sure I have, Livy said. When he checked in, I took him up in the elevator. Did you happen to notice anything weird? Josh persisted. Livy shook her head. Not really, she said, starting to enter the hotel. She stopped and turned around. There was one strange thing, Livy said. As soon as we got in the room, Dr. Cula lay down on the bed. He asked me to turn up the air conditioning to extra cold. I did, and asked him if he wanted another blanket. He said no, he'd brought his own. Livy lowered her voice. When I turned around, he was lying there with his eyes closed, wrapped in a black cape. The three kids stared at Livy. She shook her head. Poor guy must have been exhausted, she said. He fell asleep so fast I thought he was dead. Livy waggled her fingers goodbye and entered the lobby. Vampires sleep in cold coffins, Josh moaned, and they wear capes. Magicians and Salvation Army people also wear capes, Josh, Ruth Rose said. Dr. Cula could be a magician, Dink said. That might explain how he escaped from Ellie's diner and the book nook without us seeing him. And does he also make Band-Aids appear on people's necks? Josh asked. I'm going home. He started walking up Main Street. Why? Asked Dink. I thought you wanted to find Dr. Cula. I do, Josh said over his shoulder. But first we need protection. Ruth Rose looked at Dink. They both caught up to Josh. What kind of protection? She asked. Garlic, Josh said. Garlic? Dink and Ruth Rose repeated, staring at Josh. Vampires hate garlic, Josh said. We have to hang some around our necks. Around our necks? Dink said. Josh, garlic stinks. Josh rolled his eyes. Duh, that's what keeps the vampires away.